We're in the studio today with the all-new Samyang AF 35mm F1.4 P FE for Sony E-mount, and we're going to be going through 5 different lighting setups here in the studio with Clarissa. The Samyang 35mm f1.4 is a professional quality lens at an incredible price point. It keeps up with the pro level GM glass that's coming out from Sony, and it looks pretty darn cool. This lens is a full frame lens, and it's for Sony E-mount. The lens itself is pretty simple. There is a focus ring, there are no buttons on the lens, and it's a 67mm filter thread. Now, why would you want a 35mm lens? I find the 35mm lens to be the most useful lens in my bag, whether it's for a wedding or for street photography or for travel or for portraits like we're doing today. This is an incredibly versatile prime lens. Prime means that it does not zoom and you are fixed at 35mm, but you can go all the way down to f1.4, which you can't do with zoom lenses. I really love this Samyang lens when shot at f1.4. The autofocus backgrounds look amazing. Overall, they're very pleasing. I don't find any of the elements in the backgrounds to be distracting, and overall, I was just really surprised with how good this lens is. In terms of autofocus, it is fast and accurate. There's barely any noise to that autofocus, so if you are using an on-camera microphone, like a shotgun microphone, it will not be picked up. The color rendering, the micro contrast, everything about this lens, I'm really happy. I was very surprised with the focus breathing and the lack of vignetting. Both of them have been handled amazingly in this lens. In terms of flare and ghosting, the flare is handled very nicely in this lens, and in my testing, ghosting is non-existent. Overall, this 35mm lens balances really well on any camera. You can see the hint of the orange ring in there. Today we're here in the studio and we're going to go through 5 different lighting combinations, from natural light to on-camera flash, to bounce flash, to direct flash, to off-camera flash, and then eventually into more of a formal portrait setting that you're seeing me in this talking head right now. Today I'm going to be using the Sony A9 Mark III, and I'm pretty much going to shoot this lens at f1.4 for every single image that you're seeing. You don't have to do this. I just like the aesthetic quality of this lens shot wide open. Clarissa's already positioned herself perfectly. So as you can see behind her, our studio is a little messy, and when shot at f1.4, this lens is going to make that all look like art instead of clutter. Let's begin. That's nice. A little natural lit shot. Pizza on Earth. And the background, even though there's lots of clutter, it looks all right. You do want to be conscious of any hot spots you see back there. So if the sun is peeking through somewhere and it's lighting something up, you don't want that highlight to just go crazy in the background. That will distract the viewer and they'll be looking at that blown highlight. But if you're conscious of that, I think that you can kind of get away with it. The immediate use case that comes to my mind, if I'm at a wedding and I'm in getting ready coverage, I don't really have control over everything that's going on in the background, and I don't really want to tidy up, because as soon as you start tidying up, everyone else starts tidying up, and it's kind of like, oh, the photographer's here, and then everybody panics. If I can just come into the scene and work with whatever's going on, I feel like it's a better client experience, and a lens that goes down to f1.4 allows you to do that. And one tip that I do have for photographing in natural light is to usually place yourself near the window. So if it's incandescent bulbs with just different colors of light, it becomes really distracting really quickly. And if you're getting a main light that's just that one color, it just simplifies everything. It looks nicer. And then also this big window here, basically acting like a big softbox right now. A few other tips for natural light, and I guess just lighting in general, is that if you are photographing kind of this butterfly light where Clarissa's looking kind of out the window and I'm photographing back into the scene, there's not a whole lot of shadow going on, but as soon as I rotate over here, things start looking a little more cinematic, and that might be the look that you're going for. That might not be the look that you're going for, but it is a very quick and easy way to get a more cinematic looking image when there is a little bit of shadow introduced to the scene. The focus ring feels nice. I honestly, with this current Sony camera, I don't think I'll ever use it. If I am using manual focus, I'm just tapping somewhere on here. But I would say 99.9% of the time, the autofocus is always doing what I want with this lens and with this camera. Next up, flash, but bounce flash. That means I'm going to be shooting the flash off of surfaces here to essentially do what our lighting modifier is doing here, but you don't have access to one of these all the time. So sometimes you just have to make this quality of light from this single flash. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. Step 1, hopefully find a white or somewhat neutral surface, like this wall here. 2, point your flash at it and put it on TTL. Usually that gets you pretty close. Sometimes you're going to want to flip your flash to manual if you do want more control over it, but honestly, TTL off of a big white surface usually makes a pretty good light. Now you want to be about this distance or a little bit further. The idea is that this small flash head, that if I'm aiming it directly at Clarissa, it's going to be really direct and harsh light. We're going to demonstrate that in a moment. But as soon as I rotate this flash and I bounce it off of here, the light is not coming from this small flash head, that really tiny flash head that's going to make that harsh light from a distance. It's now illuminating 8 feet of this scene and throwing all this nice light back on here. So imagine that there was just a big 8-foot softbox here. That's going to make that nice light. And I'm going to be shooting the Samyang 35mm f1.4 P at 1.4 No surprise there. I only really ever use two modifiers. One of them is this diffusion cup. So what that does is it widens my beam. Some flash units are actually gonna have the option to make it wider or zoom in. So on this ProPhoto A10, by doing this, I zoom the flash in, so the beam becomes a little bit more focused, and that means that if I'm bouncing off of a ceiling that's really high, it's gonna get up there rather than trying to light up a really wide scene. If you're close like this, you probably wanna turn it all the way to wide. So let's do a little demonstration here. If you're really close to this wall here, it lights up, right? But it's a pretty small spot. You can kind of see that it's maybe around this distance here. As I get a little bit further away, now all of a sudden, it's kind of this size. And as you can see here on my LCD, it's pretty dark. And I want that because I don't want the mix of any ambient lighting coming in. This is especially important if it is mixed colors of lighting. And now, when I hit that picture button, it bounces the light off of here and then comes back at Clarissa and just makes a really nice softbox style light. You can also do this directly above you, but if you are at a distance like this, it's maybe just a couple of feet, you're probably not gonna wanna go straight up and down because the light's coming down a little bit too sharp. But what you can do is you just tilt this back a little bit and you light up the ceiling behind you, and all of a sudden the quality of light improves significantly. I personally prefer bouncing off of a wall when possible, but it is not always possible. So this direction is better than this direction for me. This feels a little bit more natural. With any flash, I am always trying to hide it and make it look like it's not just an intentionally flash lit image. So I feel like light bouncing in from here, it just looks like there's a window off screen that you can't see. And that's always what I'm trying to create, whether it's with bounce flash or any other style of flash, except for direct flash maybe. So the Samyang 35 1.4 P is an incredible portrait lens. Maybe let's rotate over here and we'll show what those distracting background elements look like if I am shooting this flash over my shoulder. So you have a few options here. I can just bounce directly over my shoulder off this wall, and then the light is gonna come back as a bigger, softer version, but it's gonna kind of feel like it's that directional flash. What I wanna be doing is probably aiming my light over here so that light bounces over there and comes back into the scene. And I'm going to zoom my flash from that wide mode back into something that actually is going to send more light over there rather than trying to cover from here to here. Now, one problem with bounce flash, especially if you're in a smaller room like this, is that your flash kind of illuminates everything and you lose the ability to control exactly where you want that light to be. And that's a problem because it's lighting up everything in the background when I just want the focus on Clarissa. So now let's switch to something that's going to isolate her a lot more, which is direct flash. This is a wedding trend that started a few years ago. And I would say it's, I guess, based on the fact that all of our parents, for the most part, had that direct flash look to their wedding photos. And people just crave that nostalgia. Direct flash photos with Samyang 35 1.4 at, again, you guessed it, 1.4. All right, with direct flash, you're going to get a bit of a shadow behind your subject. You can kind of rotate that around based on if you're photographing this way, photographing this way, photographing this way, but you can move that shadow around a little bit based on your personal preferences. But you are going to get a shadow if there's a wall close. If you don't want that shadow, you move away from the wall. We can't move far enough away from the wall in the studio to remove the shadow completely. But what I can do is I can soften this beam. So you can either turn it all the way to wide mode here, or you can use something like this diffusion cup to make the light a little bit more diffuse. So it's covering a little bit more area and making those shadows just a little bit softer. And a reason that you might want to be using direct flash like this, or you might even be pushed into a situation that you need direct flash, like if you're photographing a destination wedding and you're out on a beach at nighttime and there's no light, all of a sudden, unless you have a big softbox with you, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be photographing with a little bit more direct flash than you would like. But overall, I think it looks really good. It's definitely a look. I wouldn't shoot every single image from an entire wedding or portrait session in this style, but it is an option if you want it. You can also go into Lightroom and it's now really easy to do subject masking. So you can just select your subject and you can make the rest of the scene disappear if you want it to. I like to do the best I can in camera and not rely too much on post-production, but sometimes it is necessary, especially when you don't have full control over your situation. And now we're gonna take this flash off the camera, we're gonna put it on a light stand, and I'm gonna show you how I use that in the studio. So your flash will probably come with some sort of little attachment like this, and we use pretty basic light stands. I have a tendency to leave them at wedding days. If you are going to be doing a lot of off-camera flash, I recommend investing in a nice light stand that's also lightweight and easy to bring with you. For off-camera flash, I do it the same way that I do bounce flash, but I can be a little bit more controlled with it. What I mean by that is that bounce flash situation like this, Clarissa's standing in front of me and I'm bouncing off this wall. Now all of a sudden I can just do this and point this flash at the wall, and I can be super consistent with that flash position, and I can now rotate freely around the room. So if you're at a wedding day, this is great for a first dance, or this is great for podium shots, that you can just keep that flash exactly where it is and maintain ultimate consistency Also, if you're set to TTL and you got a good bounce and you're bouncing off something that's kind of a nice space, even if you're moving around the room, you're probably still gonna get good quality light out there. You're just gonna have to make sure that you're not overpowering your flash too hard and making it work a little bit too hard. But if you do want that ultimate control and consistency, I recommend setting it to manual. This is the transmitter. So this talks to my flash. So here we have our flash abilities. You can go plus, minus. You can also set it to manual. I'm going to start on TTL at 0, and all flashes will be a little bit different for how you set them up. For this one here, I don't think I did anything. I think I just turned it on and turned that on, and whatever the default channel is, I'm on A and I'm on 1. So as long as that's matching, that flash is going off. You can also set up multiple different groupings. So if you have different flashes around the room, different scenes set up, you can cycle through them, or you can change the intensities of those specific flashes. So if you're using a backlight or using something that's maybe a little bit more creative with a gel, you can turn those off and on your transmitter. So I'm gonna set this flash up. It's gonna be bouncing off of here. It's gonna make that nice light. You can hit the test button and see exactly what that's gonna do. I'm gonna put the diffusion cup on here. I'm get a little bit closer, there. As you can see, the beam spreads a little bit further. And again, at F1.4 on the lens here. So my flash is now bouncing off this wall here and illuminating the scene really, really well for just one single light there. Now, if you want to use this in another way, you can do the exact same thing you do with bounce flash and bounce it off the ceiling. I'll show you a few examples of that. Again, if you want to choose the diffusion cup, that'll mean that likely some light is going to be hitting this wall as well as directly above. So I'll show you what that looks like, which is pretty similar, but the direction of light has changed just a little bit. So there is some experimentation to all flash things. You might think that you know exactly what your setup's gonna be going into a scene, and if you don't experiment with a few other options, you might not ever find that exact optimum way to use your light in that space. So start with what you think is gonna work and play around from there. I like the 35 because it's a very lightweight portrait lens, and it's also not too intimidating. So Clarissa's used to being in front of a camera, but if you do have somebody like a family or a couple that's just not used to being in front of the camera, having a smaller kit like this, I feel like is a benefit. And if they come into a space and you just have a huge camera all rigged out, it's gonna be a little bit more intimidating than just something like this. I also find that in terms of a wedding day, that if I'm using a smaller lens like this, ergonomically, it's a lot better on my body. And at some point I might not take that picture, I might not be inspired to take that picture because of the fact that I've been doing this all day with a heavy lens. But with a 35 1.4 like this, it's just really easy to take pictures all day and to never feel that tiredness. Now, if you want complete control over your light, an easier way to do that is with continuous lights like we have here with this big Octobox. And there are different accessories you can put on your softbox where if you want to really control the spill of light, you can get a grid and really focus that beam just on your subject. Today we're letting it spill around a little bit, and the best way to light someone is just get that light source nice and close to them, and then also have them aware of the light source so that they're not always looking away from it. It's kind of hard to miss this one though, this one's pretty big. And we also have a second light set up over Clarissa's shoulder, which is just a little backlight hair light there. And I can either choose to hide that light, or I can use it as an element in the photo. And the closer you get to your subject, the more the background is going to turn into that nice out of focus bokeh. And good quality of light and also a big source of light at a close distance is just gonna make better images overall. And that's what it's like using the Samyang AF 35mm f1.4 P FE for full frame E-mount at a portrait session. We did it.